I always say like running an event is a terrible business to be in. It really is because like if you do your job really well.
All right, and we're here with Mather. So, Mather, listen, we've been friends for a long time. We run in different circles, but for some reason, we always manage to realign. So, for the 12 people who don't know who you are, please explain who you are.
My name is Mather Wiswall. I am probably most well known for being the commissioner and co-founder of the Florida Grid League, currently the primary existing grid league in America. And I co-founded it with my sister. That's how we originally got connected, was through the sport. But I'm also a branding guy, marketing guy, competition organizer. So I guess that about covers it.
Okay. And then when you're talking about the branding and marketing stuff, because I don't know if it's an agency, but what did you do before Grid League?
I lived in Philadelphia, and my sister and I, and my mom actually owned a design and branding agency in Philadelphia, kind of in the niche of sustainability. So we would create brands, websites, any design materials needed for a company that was entering or existing in the space and needed an upgrade. And so that was the, you know, thing that I essentially left to start with Grid. But I did bring a handful of clients with me that is still kind of my day job that I've built upon since then.
So you do branding and marketing as well as the Grid League too?
Oh yeah. Grid League doesn't really pay any bills at this point, so it's more of a side project. It's growing into something that could be more than a side project, but at this stage of its evolution, my primary income is on the branding and marketing side, and I have a handful of clients that I work with that I help them market and brand their companies.
So and I know you kind of, I mean, lightly said that it's a side gig up until it's growing into one, but I mean that's a heck of a side gig. I mean that thing must take a lot of your time, right?
Yeah, I mean, in when it comes to time allocation, it's a huge portion of the time spent on a daily basis. But it's also what I'm passionate about, and we do reinvest everything into the growth. And it's not like we don't. If we really wanted to, we could make it more profitable, but we care a lot more about returning that back to the players and teams and as much as possible, and investing in opportunities for the growth of the sport. So it's a long term play. It always has been, and that's how we approach it.
Speaking of team sports, is that something that you've always, I guess, been a part of? Is team sports growing up?
Yeah, I'm a big four Philadelphia guy. I played baseball, basketball, um, lacrosse, skateboarding growing up, and then of course been Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, Sixers fan my whole life. And so I'm a big team sports guy, big Philly team sports guy, and you got into CrossFit in 2010 was my first class. So this is really kind of an intersection between team sports and CrossFit, which is, when I say this, I mean Grid League. And that's why I dove headfirst into it, because it's like the perfect intersection of all of my interests as a human being. So that's really what got me into it.
So speaking of interests, were you were you always interested in fitness kind of growing up, or was this something that kind of happened later in life?
It was a later in life thing. In high school and college, outside of playing sports and skateboarding, I didn't really do much physically. Especially in college, I was more, you know, I was not what you would call healthy or fit necessarily in any way. But when I graduated, I started getting into it, and was doing the normal uh, back and buys type approach in the Globo gym until I found CrossFit in 2010, and then just really dove head first into everything that CrossFit teaches, from nutrition to lifestyle to fitness to Olympic lifting in periodization, everything. So I got really into it when I got into CrossFit, and it's still a big part of my life. I think in the early days of CrossFit, like the Kool-Aid drinking days, it becomes a huge part of your life. But I'm grateful for those days. It's a little bit because I was competitive and everything with it, but it's still a big part of my life. But it's less of a primary focus and more of maintaining health and performance and everything else that I do in life, essentially.
Yeah. And what was life growing up in Philly and then kind of ultimately landing down here in South Florida?
Yeah, it's very different in Philadelphia, and to be honest, I never really saw myself as a Florida guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was and am a Philadelphia guy through and through. I love the city, and I very much see that as a part of my identity. And I do love it in Florida, though. I'm moving down here has helped me to understand that I can be happy and productive pretty much anywhere, I feel like, because it is so different here, but I still really enjoy it. And I like the contrast to Philadelphia. But yeah, I mean, people are very different. Culturally, it's very different. And it was definitely an adjustment period coming down. It was hard at first, but ultimately I really enjoy it.
I mean, I think you're definitely leaning into it because I don't know if it's the lighting on the camera, but you look pretty tan right now.
It must be the lighting because I am outside every day, which is one of the beautiful things about Florida. Because in Philadelphia during the winter, you're not outside very much except for going to your car for like 6 to 9 months of the year, which wears on you even if you don't realize it. And I'm one of those cases that I didn't realize how much it wore on me throughout the year until I didn't have to do it. So I am outside every day. I do enjoy the sun and the warmth of Florida. It's one of the most important parts to me. So, but yeah, I think that answered the question.
Yeah, it definitely did. And have you learned Spanish at all being down here in South Florida?
I knew a little bit. I took 3 years of it in high school, so I knew like some of the basics. But I guess I've expanded on it very slightly since being down here. But I'm more in the Fort Lauderdale area, so it's not as prevalent as deep Miami. But I would say I would still like to add upon the skills because I don't have very much. It's still pretty elementary at this stage.
Okay. Well, listen, I've been in Miami my entire life. My first language was actually Spanish, and I completely lost it basically in middle school. So,
Is that right?
Yeah. Josie's family, which Josie's not here today, because she's taking care of the baby. We couldn't find a sitter, so she usually sits next to me when we're interviewing. But my whole thing with Spanish is once middle school happened, and granted, my grandmother speaks only Spanish, but I rarely saw her up until maybe high school. But at that point, it's too late. So I just kind of lost Spanish for a little bit, and then when I met Josie in high school, her parents only speak Spanish. So I was in trouble. It was either learn Spanish or lose the girl. And so ultimately, I think we know where I landed. I started learning Spanish through them, and then now my Spanish is a lot better. But let me tell you, man, it was difficult. So it was a grind learning Spanish, and a different dialect too, because there's just different dialects down here. It's such a melting pot. So you might say one thing and it means something else to somebody else.
Yeah, I didn't know you could lose a language like that. I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like working out. If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was pretty difficult getting it back. But just on the topic, I guess kind of sorta in the same realm. Josie and I have ran PBH for going on 13 years now, and you work with your sister. Have you guys always worked together on different projects, and how's that like? What's that dynamic like?
Yeah, we kind of have. She moved away for a few years after college. She moved to California, then Florida, while I was still in Philadelphia. And then when she moved back to Philly, I got her a job at the company I was working with at the time. And so she did very similar things to what she does now at the Florida Grid League at project management, and I was doing design and sales in a branding company. And so we were there together, then she left there, then I left there, and then we started the company together. We were doing that for, I want to say 4 or 5 years before we started doing Grid together. So it's been 15 plus years working together.
Okay. And what are your guys' roles in Florida Grid League?
I am the marketing, branding, design, visual appeal side of things, and also the competition side of things. And she is staff development, sponsorship sales, and more of the operations side of things. So she's more operations, I'm more like creative and vision.
So you guys have a very similar dynamic to Josie and I, which is she's the brain and I'm the heart, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So she's the one, she's the operations, she's behind the scenes, she's making things happen, and I'm the forward-facing guy. I'm the one that's kind of speaking to the clients or whatever it may be, helping the thing grow. So it's pretty cool that you guys have a very similar dynamic.
Yeah, I run into that a lot, I feel like, in partnerships, because you have to have both roles, right? Or you have to have some form of both roles, and oftentimes they're kind of encapsulated in a single personality. So it's pretty cool when it works out in a partnership like that.
Yep. And how do you guys, because at the end of the day, you guys are brother and sister. So how do you manage disagreements?
Sometimes with emotion, but we've gotten really good at working through it. Doesn't mean there's never emotion. Of course, because we have very different personalities and we come at things from very differently, there's oftentimes conflict, which is natural and healthy. And so we're typically pretty good at working through that. Of course, we have our moments, but we always understand the reasons each other is coming at it from the reason, why they do. So having that understanding and awareness as it plays into the type of person that we each are makes it much more easy to kind of work through logically and find the middle ground. Sometimes it's more on my end where the end decision lies. Sometimes it's more on her end. It really just depends on the situation. But that awareness, that understanding really helps to be able to work it out when there is conflict or difference.
And I can't imagine that it's always been that way growing up, right?
No. Yeah. Working together, as long as we have, it takes a long time to get to that point. But we've spent a lot of time working on ourselves, understanding ourselves and each other and how the partnership works and why it works to get to the point to be able to work through that kind of thing. So,
well, you mentioned working on yourselves. I guess what are kind of some of those things that you do to work on yourself, right? Are there specific books? Do you do, I know some people do meditation. Some people do ice baths now. Exercise is a way to release. So, what are some of those things that you do to kind of work on yourself to make yourself a better person?
Most of what you just described. The main thing is staying healthy, staying fit, building everything on a good foundation in nutrition and sleep, and then I do work on the mental component a lot as well, because I feel like that's just as important as the physical, and finding the space to reset and think about bigger picture things, but also develop self-awareness. I think is very critical. That a lot of people, if everybody worked on self-awareness a little bit more in the world, I feel like we'd live in a much better place. So that's really important to me. And honestly, it's probably the most important thing when it comes to what's not traditional, I would say. Just understanding why you think the way you do, why you have emotions about the things you have emotions about. Is that actually applicable to things that you want to achieve? And is it helpful or not? Is, the main questions that I feel like if everybody asked those questions of themselves, there would be a lot less conflict in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes when I'm having a disagreement with Josie or a friend or something like that, I kind of take a step back, and I'm sure you probably do this too. I take a step back and I'm like, well, is this worth it? Right?
Mhm.
Is this conflict, is being right worth it right now? Um, and in most cases, it's no, because ultimately the relationship is worth more than the resolution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say, most of the time, at least for myself, when I'm heated about something, it's usually because there's some form of emotion within myself or the person I'm talking to that's not helpful. It doesn't serve the purpose that we're trying to achieve. And it's probably based on some, past evolutionary helpfulness that doesn't apply now in the modern day world. And so if you can identify that and, you know, take it for what it is, it really helps take the sting out of a lot of conflict that exists, no matter whose side it's on, and then you can actually appropriately, address the situation. Because, I mean, if you've been in a relationship for more than a year, then you've had some pretty big disagreements and fights about really silly and stupid things that when you look back on it, you're like, what the hell were we even fighting about, But that comes back to unhelpful emotions or thought processes being involved that ultimately don't help anything. So the more you can be aware of them, identify them, and kind of approach them for what they are, the more you're going to have the ultimate outcome that you want, which is, like you said, a better relationship, more efficiency in coming to a good resolution, and a lot less time, energy, and I guess focus wasted on things that don't really matter.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And usually in a lot of cases, when I'm in a conflict, um, and someone mentions something and it upsets me, and I'm not usually one to get upset at a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but when I do get upset at something and I reflect on it, in most cases it's because they're right. And the reason why I'm upset is because they were right about whatever it is. You're being lazy about something. You're acting this way or whatever it is. You dropped the ball on this project or whatever it may be. And the reason why you get upset is because you're like, when you really start to think about it, you're like, man, I'm not upset at them. I'm upset at myself. I'm just projecting onto them that I'm upset at myself. I'm disappointed in myself, right? And ultimately disappointing them. So yeah, you're 100% on the button with that.
Defending the ego,
Yeah,
when your ego's like, no, 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 I'm not wrong. That's when you feel the emotion, but that defensiveness is because your ego doesn't want to be wrong. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's not.
yeah.
In my opinion, anyway. So, but
I
I
agree.
totally I resonate with what you're saying for sure.
We're aligned. Um, so let's talk about the grid league. And I know that we, like I said, we've been connected through the grid, so to speak, for many years.
Mm-hmm.
But just walk me through that. What's the history with grid league? What is it exactly for those who don't know? Because it's an extremely fascinating sport. But I would rather hear it from you than hearing it from me.
So, in its simplest form and how we often describe it in one line is it's a cross between football and CrossFit. So if football and CrossFit had a baby, it would be Grid League. And so it's very different than both, but it takes the best parts of both and applies them in a team sport that is made up of a series of races. A typical match has 11 races, and there's two teams that participate in a given match, which is what we call our events. And those teams are constructed of a wide range of athletic types. So everything from a really heavy barbell centric strength specialist, as we call them, to super small, super light, super fast bodyweight specialists, and then everything in between. So a utility player does some of each, and is typically in that kind of middle ground range of body type. A typical CrossFitter fits into that utility player kind of category a lot quicker. So it really brings together a lot of different body types, backgrounds, perspectives, personalities. It's a very diverse sport by its very nature. A good grid team almost has to be diverse because the elements of the races vary a ton. They highlight very specific athletic components within somebody. So, weightlifting is a big part of it. So the stronger you are, the more efficient you're going to be at those elements. There's body weight elements, and so the smaller and quicker you are, and the better body awareness and things that you have from backgrounds like gymnastics, the better you're going to be at those elements. And then there's combinations. So some require both. And then the way that the races lay out and the succession of the races require that diversity in the team to be efficient and effective at the sport. And so really, ultimately, all of that lays the groundwork for what makes the sport what it is, which is having big teams of both men and women together that are extremely diverse. And that creates as many interesting storylines as you can possibly imagine. And it creates opportunity for anybody out there that is exposed to the sport to resonate with one of the players because they see somebody that looks like them. They see somebody that has a lot of the physical characteristics that they do or the interests that they do because there's such a wide range of, types of people on these teams. So, I'm big into storytelling. I'm big into sports. I'm big into demonstrating athletic greatness. And I'm big into strategy. And, I love the strategic end of football, the statistics and everything else. So that outside of grid league, football is my favorite sport. So it really is a very good kind of correlation in that regard. It takes the best parts of football and applies them. It takes the best parts of CrossFit. And it takes a lot of inspiration and elements from American Ninja Warrior, too, which is becoming a big part of our society as well. Because it's structured very similarly, it just takes a wider range of athletic feats than American Ninja Warrior does and applies them in a team sport with a shorter time frame, which is, brings more high speed and excitement into it. So that's kind of my quick spiel, I guess I'd say.
I love it. Look at you're out of breath just explaining it, and it's funny because that's how I feel watching these races. If people go on to the handles at FL Grid League, if they go on there, they're gonna see some gnarly moves. There's some serious moves that are going on there. People are doing like a toes to bar to a pull up, and then like you see people stringing out these. Like the muscle ups look like nothing. These people are like I think the bodyweight specialists that you're mentioning. They're just essentially flying through the air. It's a marvel to see these people move the way that they move. And it's crazy because on the sidelines you'll catch Mather just kind of stoically looking at what's going on. How do you manage to be so stoic during all this commotion? Because it is a really exciting sport.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I agree. It's weird, man. You get locked in, and I feel bad sometimes because people think that I'm on the sidelines and I'm not really involved with what's going on, so they'll try and talk to me and I can't. Like I am locked in. I am focused on what's going on. I have one job to play, and it's everything in that moment during a race is doing that job to the best of my ability. So it's actually really easy for me because I just get sucked in and locked into the role that I'm supposed to play. So it's not hard at all, but people that see it from the outside and don't understand how I'm approaching it, thinking about it, all the thought that I've put into it can definitely be like, yeah, what you're saying is like, how do you, not get kind of swept up in what goes on? But it's pretty easy once you've been doing it for a while. It kind of comes naturally.
Yeah, and how many seasons has the Grid League been going on right now?
This is our 6th official season in this model of Grid League, which is different from the original model, but this is the one that we started in 2017, and COVID's in there as well, so that was not a typical season, obviously, but that gives you the idea of how long we've been around.
And how does a season break down?
It's very much like football. So it has a regular season, playoff, and championship. The main difference from football at this stage is we have a lot fewer regular season matches. So each team plays 4 times in the regular season at a minimum throughout the year. And then the playoffs are the top 2 teams in each conference. And the winners of those playoff matches go on to the championship of the year.
Okay. And when I'm watching these videos on Instagram or on YouTube, I'm noticing that, and for the right reason, the women get so much engagement, like way more than the dudes. And I mean, and I can see why. It's because these women are incredible. I mean, they're doing they're beating dudes in a lot of these races. Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I think one of the cool components of our sport is that traditionally in sports in general, but especially team sports, men have always been the forefront, the focus. Especially if you go back, 10 years and before, from the 1990s and on, there was almost no women's sports except for like tennis and a couple things. So I love that it's kind of swinging the other way now. I think that's really cool. I think that's the direction of society. And I'm the type of person that when you see the pendulum swinging in the direction for society, then you want to be ahead of that, and be a part of that. And so that's what I see this sport as, because you're seeing things like women's soccer, women's basketball, get a lot more popular. And then you look at sports like CrossFit. We're big fans of CrossFit, and the same dynamic is generally speaking pretty true in that females get a lot of the attention. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One is what you mentioned, which is it's kind of bucking the traditional role in sports. So when a female does beat a male in a specific element, that's never been seen before, and it's crazy. And it's commonplace in our sport, which is not commonplace in general society, and therefore gets a lot of attention for that alone. But one of the words that is often associated with our sport and the clips that people see on our sport on social media is inspiration. And I think that females can be very inspiring when they buck those traditional terms, but also visually as women that want to aspire to have a physique of another woman or something like that. And then obviously guys appreciate it too. So I think the combination of all of that has definitely led to females being the stars of our league. And I think it's great. And there's definitely plenty of guys that get a lot of attention and and are also appreciated for their roles within the sport. And ultimately, I think the fact that there's both involved is what makes the sport, important in society and the world. But I also like the fact that, you're naturally seeing women be the kind of center of attention in a lot of ways. And, I think it's in a lot of ways overdue in sports because, they're half of the population and haven't gotten near the attention that guys have to this point. So, they're making up for lost ground in a sense.
Yeah. And I think they're doing an amazing job because when you see these women, granted, if you see me in a gym, the girls are definitely dominating me. In any kind of workout, any capacity. If Josie and I are lifting next to each other, she's destroying me, so I don't even lift next to her because she just embarrasses me and stuff like that. So I try not to lift next to her. Well, you're mentioning you mentioned a couple times now about learning things. What's some of the stuff that you're learning now?
I'm pretty into artificial intelligence right now. And I think it's one of those things that it's like the internet or, understanding social media. If you can be ahead of the curve a little bit, it's kind of a game changer in being efficient in the modern society. So I do feel like there's big potential for that to be a similar situation. So almost every day I'm learning something about it, trying something, trying a new platform, and I'm loving it. I think it's fun. I really do like to learn new stuff like that. So
Yeah, I've been pretty good. I've kind of taken a deep dive into prompting, so like just like prompting ChatGPT to do stuff, right? Because a lot of people, even though it's an amazing tool, a lot of people don't know about it, and they know of it, but they don't know how to use it, right? Um, and I've gotten pretty good at just learning how to prompt things, right? To kind of get a good answer. Um, have you I guess dabbled into, I'm assuming yes, but what other things outside of like ChatGPT are you seeing, and how does that how do you think that plays in the league, right? Like, would you be able to integrate AI one way, shape, or form into the league?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big philosophies that we currently use that AI pours the gasoline onto is repurposing content. So, you create one piece of long form, and then you create several pieces of short form, and you create articles, and you pull out captions, and all of those things. Well, that can now be automated in a lot of ways with artificial intelligence, and so we've already done a lot of that. But one of my favorite tools that is really in its infancy that will have big impact on the league is Bard, because you can do a lot of research with it very quickly. It's just wildly inaccurate right now, and so you have to be very careful with the information that it gives you. But when it is going to be, or when it is efficient and when it's accurate, it's going to be an absolute game changer in a lot of ways for events, because you can research things that you either have to spend hours on yourself or have a staff member spend a lot of time on and train them how to research. So that one's a big one that I'm excited about. And then Leonardo. Leonardo is like the it's like a Mid-Journey alternative, but it's image development, and it's one of my favorites because I'm artistic by nature. So I'm a designer, and so I've been using it a lot, and so I do think that will also come into play a lot as we, adjust and I guess kind of gravitate towards what artificial intelligence can do from a branding and brand presentation perspective. And so I've been playing with that a lot and seeing how that might play out in the future is in how we project and present our sport through those types of systems.
Cool. And how do you see the sport growing? Because I mean, if you look at your social media channels, there's a lot of views, a lot of Instagram followers, a lot of YouTube views. Which, by the way, you guys currently stream your matches, right, on your YouTube channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And where do you see the sport going in the next year, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so the model that it's built upon, the key element of what I think is important to making the sport big is the fact that it's a team sport that has all of the advantages of a team sport, in that there's consistent branding from year over year for people to get vested in and continue to build allegiance towards, and then bring their friends into. Same reason I've been an Eagles fan with my friends my whole life. This sport has that capability versus something like CrossFit, where the stars recycle every year, and you might have some that get in for 5 years straight, but then they're gone. Same with American Ninja Warrior. So that consistency year over year is a big advantage. You also have the inherent individualism of being associated with a region. So I'm from Philadelphia. I associate with those teams. And so that's another big built-in bridge to fandom, is when you have a team in your region and they're your automatic, like, that's who you root for, So so those components, combined with the fact that it's men and women on the same team, and that's the direction of society anyway. Like, we're going in that direction of the more popularity of team sports, equality, in the workplace, equality everywhere is a, obviously what one of the forefronts of society and development in those aspects of society. And then and so those elements are really about being ahead of the curve of where society is going. And then social media is about kind of like what are the few second applications of our sport that we can throw up there in a short form format that's going to grab people's attention, make them say wow, appreciate the player, recognize that we exist, see the brand, and then hopefully do that a few more times over the course of a month, a year, and then take them to our live streams that you mentioned eventually. And once they get to a live stream and say, oh yeah, I've seen those clips, let me watch a match. And we've proven that when people start watching a match, they keep watching a match because YouTube distributes our matches broadly because it sucks people in and they start watching. So the main thing that we wanted to prove out with this model now is that the CrossFit, MMA, soccer have all developed in the country in the past 10 to 20 years from nothing essentially. And the main difference from them to us is they're all built upon or have a large component of participation. So people participate in CrossFit, they follow CrossFit. They participate in soccer as kids, they follow soccer. And even MMA has a very big growing portion of participation, and that has translated into a lot of fandom. Now, I think UFC is as close to our model, which I'm about to talk to in a second, as all of those that I just mentioned, in that the percentage of people that actually participate of fans of the UFC is very small in comparison to, say, CrossFit, where it's a very large portion of the fans that actually participate in CrossFit. So what we needed to prove from a model perspective, the way that we're approaching it, is that we don't have to have a higher level of participation in the sport for fandom to grow. And so in the recent 2 to 3 years, we've really had the capability to prove that out because our fandom has continued to grow, even though we haven't done, the development of participation events alongside of that. So, participation is important to us. Like, we want to continue to have more and more people play the sport. But when we stood back and looked, and this really happened in the pandemic when we were kind of forced to take a step back and look at what are the fastest growing aspects of the sport, the verticals that have the most traction, that if we pour gasoline into are going to yield the biggest growth of the sport. And it was very apparent that it was the media side. It was the people paying attention that have never played Grid League. And so we leaned into that over the past year since. And our viewership on the live streams, which is really what's most important to me. It's really cool when we have viral clips that go on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts and whatnot. But those don't translate into real fans all the time. A percentage will, but they need more than that to become a real fan of the sport itself. And so what we're seeing is the live streams are getting more and more traction year over year. So this year compared to last year, we've got 3 times the amount of view through on our match live streams from the same set of matches as last year. So
wow, incredible.
Yeah, that's really what we wanted to see. So that's a big multiple of the year before that, which was really the first real year that we live streamed in 2021. So we're really excited about that. And the other thing is, I mentioned earlier that we continue to just reinvest everything that we can into the sport. And so this year will be the first year that we, assuming everything goes well, and we never want to promise because you never know with the landscape of what goes on, but our plan is to live stream all of our events this year. And that will be actually the first time that we've ever done that. And so that really gives a lot more opportunity for that bigger fan base to continue the action throughout the year and hopefully become bigger and bigger and stronger fans through this year, and then kind of get that flywheel going for following years through having more people actually participate in the American Grid Trials. And then we're actually going to have an opportunity for all levels Grid League for the first time in a couple of years pre-pandemic at the championship this year. So, we want to do more and more of those kinds of things, but when it came to where we had to prioritize to, get the biggest leverage opportunities as far as what's going to create the most growth in the shortest amount of time, it really came down to those media opportunities and live streaming. So those have been the main focus, and it's paying off.
So live streaming and sporting events really fascinate me because it looks like a huge undertaking when it comes to I don't even know where to start. I mean, it would be announcers, right? Scoreboards, the actual media team itself. Like, what are the logistics when it comes to creating a live event?
Man, there's a ton, and I was just talking to one of our staff members who is a former player in the league, and she is helping develop the stat system for the players. And she's like, this is crazy how much work and how much effort and how much, attention and people involved in this one little component of what we're doing, which is the stats around the players. And every single category of running an event or a sport is like that. There's just so much time, effort, thought, care that has to go into every component because there's so many variables at any given time. And I always say, like, running an event is a terrible business to be in. It really is, because, like, if you do your job really well, people don't really think about it that much. They're like, oh, that was cool, I want to do it again. But that's as it should be. But if you make mistakes, it's like the world ends, and you're seeing that with CrossFit. Like, they get drugged through the coals every year. And Wadapalooza is another one. Like, they always get a lot of complaints and things, but I think it's, running events is one of those things where it's really, really, really difficult for people on the outside to really understand all of the variables and components that it takes to effectively run an event, and how everything's just like on this, like, balance beam of falling off the cliff, but you have to focus on so many things at once that you just have to find that balance at all times. And so, I appreciate the question, because it's one of those things, like, why it's nobody's fault. Of course, when you're watching an event, why would you think about all the things that go into making that event happen? You're just there to enjoy the event. And part of the luxury of enjoying the event is being able to have an opinion about it one way or another. And that, that's your luxury, that's your right, and that's why you would watch that event. But at the same time, I think, I have a lot of empathy and understanding for when other events run into issues and problems that ultimately they get a lot of flack for. A, because I've been on the side of it where I've also gotten flack, but B, because I understand how easy and quick these things can happen in these situations when there's so many different people, so many different variables involved with making things happen. So I appreciate the question. And yes, live streaming is one of those things that takes a lot more than it seems, as far as effort, tension, focus, coordination, people involved, but also investment. Like, it costs money. And, and it's one of those things that you have to protect. When it comes to the bottom line, if it's something that's really important to you, because it's one of those few line items in an event that can have real impact, one way or the other, if you need to find room in the budget for some reason, or if you have a problem, can get out of control as far as what's required in the budget. So, I don't get a chance to talk about that kind of thing very often, so I appreciate that question.
Yeah, it every time I see, like, when I see the live streams, I'll see, like, the bottom, and it'll say have, like, the teams, and then, like, and the different camera angles and all that. And I'm just like, man, I can't imagine what actually goes into a production like this, because ultimately that's what it is. It's a production. Yeah, it's an event, but you have lighting, you have camera crew, you have announcers and all that, and all that has to kind of work seamless to make it seem like Yeah, kind of like what you said. Like people just are expecting it to work.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. Our live streaming capacity is archaically simple compared to CrossFit or football or anything like that. I've been in the truck of a CrossFit broadcast, and I know one of the main directors from his time with Grid League, and so it is incredible the amount of people and the amount of systems and the amount of wires and the amount of cameras and everything that's involved with one of those. It's incredible the cost, and our systems and our variables and are a fraction of those, quite frankly. But I'm really proud of what we do put out based on how much we have capability-wise and budget-wise compared to those entities. Even though we have a lot of things we want to do and a lot more room to grow, I think we do a lot with the little that we have, and so that's what we'll continue to try and do. But yeah, it's crazy, man. There's a lot that goes into it.
And on the back end of a match, right?
Mm-hmm.
So outside of the athletes, how many people are involved with the production?
I think we, on average, have between 70 and 100 on our staff for any given event.
That's amazing. And is it kind of like a mix of salaried people, contractors, employees, or like volunteers?
Yeah. We don't really have salaries per se. We have, monthly allocations, I'll say, or stipends, but because there's not really a payroll, because it's seasonal. So everything's different throughout the year. But yeah, it's a combination. One of the things, like, we do have a small section of volunteers, but they're very kind of like entry level positions, and we do invest in our staff a lot more than traditional CrossFit competitions. For example, we pay all of our referees, and if you've been around for a while as a referee, then you make decent money per event, especially compared to CrossFit, where you don't make anything, which is not a judgment necessarily, because I get it. It's a really hard line item for us to swallow every year because it's such a big one. But and the other advantage that we have is we have 2 lanes and 2 teams going at any given time. So that cuts down on the required number of people from a referee staff perspective significantly compared to when you have 10 lanes and 6 stations in each lane and whatnot. So that's another big variable and advantage that we have. But of course, we're going to lean into the advantage that we have. But yeah, so it is a combination. There are some volunteers, but everything else is like per event, or there's certain projects that we'll pay for the project and things like that. So it varies a lot.
If on the athlete side, if someone wants to get involved, because I know you mentioned earlier about different tiers, if someone wants to get involved in Grid, what are these tiers that you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, so this year we'll have an all levels version of Grid League. So anybody can sign up, doesn't matter what your skill level is, and you can set up your own team, and it'll be a lot of fun. And it's a great way to get your foot in the door at a low kind of, barrier to entry, and just see what it's like, have fun playing it, spend the same amount of time and effort that you would on any other competition. And then if you want to play on one of the main teams, so there's 8 teams in Florida, and if you want to play on one of those, then we have what's called the American Grid Trials. And that is essentially a combine where there's a set of skills tests that people take. And those skills tests focus on individual components of somebody's athleticism. So, there's body weight focused tests, there's heavy weight focused tests, there's some that are a combination. And people that take or that participate in the trials can do as many of those tests as they want, that they feel best, feature the best abilities that they have, or I guess more accurately, depending on your level of fitness or athleticism, what you think might be valuable to a team. And so those tests are entered. Each one has a cash prize. There's no overall score. And then the entries from the American Grid Trials are what the teams use to recruit. So when they have a position that they need on their teams, they'll go into the American Grid Trials, they'll look at the test results for those positions that they need, and then look at the top scores. And we don't have a draft because, location that somebody lives dictates largely what team they'll be able to play for oftentimes. And, there's just too many logistics and requirements that come into play for a team to require a player to play for them versus another team at this stage of the sport's development. So what we kind of do is release the access to American Grid Trials signups in a progression that relates to kind of like a draft order. So, the best players that are available in the American Grid Trials are most often, addressed first, or people have access to them first that performed worse the previous year in the season overall, if that makes sense. So if somebody wants to play, they sign up for the American Grid Trials, they take these tests, those scores are put out, and then teams will recruit, so they'll get in touch. But we always tell people that if you really want to play, there's no time frame that you have to wait until you get in touch with a team. Teams might not respond right away, or they might give you a direction that they're not looking for people or whatever. But the more contact that you make with teams, the more you're on the radar, and especially if you have certain things that they might need and you show them that, that goes a long way towards, building a connection that's going to be valuable to actually get on one of the teams. And of course, coming to the events too, because you can, we're still small enough that you can take pictures with the players, and if you want to go talk to a coach, you can go right up to them and say, hey, I want to play next year. Here's my name, and here's who I am, and here's what I do. And there's a good chance that you'll make a connection that they'll remember. So there's a lot of, if you really want to play in a league, there's a lot of ways to do it. And one other cool thing that's coming out this year that I'm really excited about is, typically there's a sign-up period for the American Grid Trials that happens right prior to the trials opening. So, for example, we'll open in January, and then the trials will run in April. And this year, we're actually going to open trials registration soon. And so people can register anytime throughout the year. And the reason I like that is because a lot of people will get in touch, in various times of the year. And we'll have hundreds of people be like, oh, I want to play the sport. Like, how do I get information? So we'll sign up for information, and we'll send it to them. But then they don't follow through when the time comes again because conditions have changed, life has changed, they forgot about it, they didn't follow through, or whatever. But if they signed up for the trials, then they've already made a commitment. So I'm hopeful that'll get a lot more people to actually participate in the trials, which is a really fun thing to do because, I'll give you an example of a test, which is 4 rope climbs for time. Some people are really just naturally good at that. And the more people you can have involved that are naturally really good at that, the more fun it makes that test. So I'm hopeful we'll have a lot more participants in the grid trials this year because registration will be open all year, and the cost is just going to increase each month. It starts pretty reasonable number at $16 to register.
Okay, so I guess if anybody wants to learn more about you, about the Grid League, where should they go? What would be the best place to find you and the action?
So obviously follow us on the socials. FL Grid League is our handles, as you mentioned. But the best thing to do is become an insider, Grid League Insider. So if you go to thefgl.com/insider, put your email in and you'll get all of the information. So I write articles for that. Our stats girl, Carissa, who I mentioned earlier, she writes articles. Anytime that we have announcements regarding rule changes or when events happen or unique things for the events or things like players getting injured or teams needing to change the roster, that all goes through Grid League Insider. So that's really how you get the best information about the sport. And then everybody in the sport is very accessible, so myself included. So if you ever have questions or anything, you'll be able to find me on the website.
Cool. Mather, I can probably talk with you and about fitness and about the Grid League all day. I know that I only booked you for an hour, so Obviously we're, the episode ends here, but just any final plugs, anything that you're excited about, any hopes for the sport, just anything, I guess, any parting thoughts that you may have.
Well, I'm really grateful that we've continued to stay in contact over the years, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk with you. And I hope to see you at an event soon. We'd love to have you. You're obviously invited. And so, that would be the main thing. And I hope to see everybody else that hears this at a match as well.
Mather, I appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you, sir.
The best, man.
And you as well. And say hi to Josie for me.